as promised, last slide, please recognize budget is a scope of work as much as your narrative is a scope of work. Your budgets should tell in 2 pages exactly what your 20-page narrative does. So when we're about done, I go back and make sure those two documents marry each other, love each other, till death do them part. Budget is a scope of work as much as a narrative scope of work. And I think some grant developers forget that, and they submit what appears to a grant reader to be 2 separate documents. Not going to get those grants. Get ready for the late surprise. It always happens. It always happens. I can't believe it. It is like clockwork. Every grant I've ever worked on, in the last 7 days, something happens. It's like the October surprise in an election. For me, I told you my mistake of not rereading the solicitation and having a fatal flaw 2 weeks ago. And I even warned James and our staff who were working on this. We started day 1 on the grant. I said, because James, I don't think you'd done this before, gone into this madcap world of grant development. I said, there will be a late surprise. I guarantee you it will happen, and we're all going to feel deflated, and I guarantee you we're going to fix it. But I just want you to know it's coming. And I'll be damned, it did again. But prepare for it, and start thinking in advance, how do we deal with late surprises as an organization? Because it always happens. Grant partner goes on vacation, didn't tell you they were on vacation, and they owe you a budget and a letter of support, and they're in Fiji. Had that. Not Fiji, but gone. All sorts of wacky things happen. FedEx moves the pickup box, and they didn't tell you? I live by that FedEx box, 4 o'clock pickup time. Used to be in our basement. They moved it to the adjacent building. Can't tell you the ensuing late surprise panic that happened 30 minutes before the pickup. We had the O.J. Simpson going on all over office, sending staff out. Find the box. Late surprise. We should have double checked. I mean, FedEx, it's within their rights and privileges to move their pickup boxes. Showing up is 90% of success. Take this one to heart. So much of this grant development stuff is just keep standing, because we've competed with the best of them in our community, and we've got good ones in all the counties. Pierce, Snohomish County, the Eastern Washington counties, Vancouver, Portland partnership, Portland, Oregon partnership. I mean, these are good shops, and we compete friendly. We compete, and we even join each other often too. But inevitably in a grant, I've seen grants start where 8 people are going for it in your community, and usually by the day before submittal, there's 2 left standing. And some of winning this stuff, frankly, is just take care of your health, take emergency, try and maintain your motivation on your team and reach that finish line. I also find late night when I'm writing these a really solid Cab Merlot blend helps the process as well. Think about needs before you shop for funds. I talked about that. Read the solicitation. You can see I keep referencing that. I think it's very important. Design clear roles and responsibilities across partnerships. That's key, because if you don't and you actually get the grant, you'll have a partner say, I don't want to do that anymore, or you didn't tell me I was supposed to do that, or even worse, that's not enough money for me to do that. Who wrote this budget? But by the time you get the grant, you can't change any of that stuff. You've got to do it. So I'd rather have all the skeletons out of the closets and the hard conversations up front, so it's easier to implement. Be strategic, be thoughtful about your sources of funding. Philanthropic is not always the way to go. Federal is not always the way to go. I think a blend is the way to go. And lastly, and just as a reminder, check for vacations, because that always burns me. It's amazing how many people actually take them. Because critical people that you need in a grant process, especially at external agencies, are gone. I'll reference this, not to call too much attention to Mr. Jeff Marcel, but in this last grant, we needed Jeff in a lot of ways. And I had that conversation with Jeff. I said, I need you in these ways. And he said, yeah, no sweat, man, but here's what I need you to know. I'm going to Scotland tomorrow, and I'm gone for however many days. Maybe it was only 4 or 5. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That's inconvenience to my life right now. And Jeff, took me back from the ledge and said, hey, here's the deal. I mean, we've already had the general conversation. I'm sure in the next 5 days you're going to scope out the specifics, and we're going to have another conversation. It's going to be okay. Now, if I hadn't learned from experience at Check for Vacations, I wouldn't have called Jeff. And we would have had that conversation too late in the process when he got back from this European trip, which, by the way, wasn't really a vacation, it was work, so don't blame Jeff, is that mostly work. When he came back, we were ready to go, but definitely check for vacation. So with that, I am turning the podium over to you for any questions you may have about this or thoughts you may have. Rebuttals are welcome. I'm a constantly learning organism too, so if you want to tell me I'm doing something wrong, please, because this is hard work, and I always like to make it better. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
So Dan works with Mary Jane in my shop a lot, back and forth, and Mary Jane must have a bazillion years, we will not say how many, in grant writing and such. And so agree with just everything. So, and we work really well together, as you had said. We, partner, or we compete, and we still love each other and whatnot, and it's all about bringing the dollars in. But when I came in 5 years ago as CEO, we had like 5 grants that weren't paying for themselves. And I was like, how do I run a business when it was the right thing to do, and my heartstrings and da-da-da-da, but there wasn't enough admin to pay. I mean, so that's our rule as we do the budget. So maybe you could say something, and that's one of the reasons we do the budget right up front is, can it pay for itself?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I had said earlier that we try and take something around 12% admin. We don't want it to go any higher. Our job really is to serve the community. But that being said, in order to get this work done, we do have staff salaries and some rent and all of that stuff that need to be compensated to do it and do it well. So the way we address it is we know exactly how much our costs are from an administrative and a program level, and it equates to a aggregate FTE. And here's where the delicate part comes, and it goes right back to the whiteboard for me. And that's why the whiteboard stays up the whole time I do the process. I have to be able to figure out, well, it looks great on the whiteboard, but how much of our staff time is gonna it take to do that? And I take a wag at it initially. I'm like, I think that's a half person. I work in quarters. That's a half, that's a 3/4, that's a 1, that's a 1.5. And then I break it down into our number of subcontracts we've got to push, the reporting requirements of the solicitation, and I start testing the FTE that I think it's going to be, and then it never works. It never pencils, right? I'm like, man, we need 5 people to do this thing, and I pencil it out and it doesn't work, and then I go back to the whiteboard and I see if I can tighten the design and save costs. But eventually you can't tighten it anymore. I mean, you get so lean, it's like we can't do it anymore lean. And then I figure out, are there responsibilities that we would do that I can delegate or someone else can do at lower cost? So I go back to the partnership and say, hey Jeff, think you can do this, or do you have another source for this, for instance? And then I have the hard conversation, and the hard conversation is inevitably the budget doesn't pencil, and I don't get go until Marlena says go, and I go. But go means so many things, by the way. Go means work on a grant. Is it different than it's a good one, submit it? But I go in with the budget and the penciling of our costs, and I say, on this one, I think we're short $50,000 over the life of the grant to cover our costs. Do you think it's worth trying to still do it? And then if we get it, tighten it up as we go. And Marlena makes the calls for us, Sue, ultimately, but our chief financial officer, myself, and Marlena sit down with the full budget before we've written the narrative and try and collectively figure out how to cover our costs. And then if we can't, sometimes we take it because it's that important for the community. And then sometimes we have to say no to the grant. So yeah, it's the same conversation you're having in your shop. Any other questions? Yeah, please, welcome.
Dan, this Jeff Marcel with Enterprise Seattle. First, I want to say how much we appreciate your collaboration. The WDC is just a fantastic organization. We really appreciate it. And you guys are the experts in terms of grants. So I don't think I've ever asked you this question, but in terms of finding supporters or support, Once that grant is submitted, then is there a cone of silence around the people that approve it or don't approve it? Is there any lobbying activity or any strategies that take place in any of that in
No.
that world?
Jeff used that word, by the way. Expunge it from the record. I'm just having fun with him. No, it does go into the cone of silence. And most of our grants that we submit are federal, and they go into, I have this vision. If you've ever seen the Department of Labor building, by the way, in DC, it is a fortress. It's a big, dark, fortress-like building. And I imagine these grants come in on a truck in the basement, and it's dark. And I imagine they get routed to a bunch of grant readers who haven't seen the light of day in 6 or 7 years, and they're pasty skin, and you can't access them. There's no way to even massage the process in our world. Now, where some of this does change a little bit, Jeff, is in the philanthropic world with a family foundation, where a lot of those grants we actually get asked to apply for by the foundation. And that's because we built up those relationships over time. So you can't just randomly apply to a philanthropy. You have to be asked to apply. So that's when you actually have time. We might say to you, will you come and make a presentation with us on behalf of our grant? Seattle Foundation does that a lot. But most of the federal stuff we do, it goes into the cone of silence, and we wait. And you never know when it's going to be announced. All of our grants, I have to write a timeline implementing October 1st, because I have to. But they may announce it on January of the next year, and I have to go back and recalibrate it all. So it disappears. And I tell you, for me behaviorally too, I've always been a serial monogamist, and I'm a committed dad and husband. But I'll tell you, in the grant world, I have always enjoyed playing the field. I will write a grant, and it goes in the cone of silence, and I forget about it. I'm on to the next one, and you just wait for it to. Inevitably, you're going to hear either way, and we move on to the next one.